Hello, and welcome to the How to Exit podcast, where we introduce you to a world of small to medium business acquisitions and mergers. We interview business owners, industry leaders, authors, mentors, and other influencers with the sole intent to share with you what it looks like to buy or sell a business. Let's get rolling. And now a moment for our sponsors. I want to highly recommend you get Acquisition Aficionado magazine. Every month, Acquisition Aficionado magazine brings you tactics for business buying and selling you won't find anywhere else. Learn firsthand from industry leaders who share their success stories, featuring in-depth interviews and stories from leading figures in the business acquisition industry. This multi-platform mobile magazine speaks to acquisition entrepreneurs wherever they are in the journey. And I want you to visit acquisitionaficionado.com today. Hello and welcome to the How to Exit podcast. Today I'm here with David Barnett, and I'm looking forward to this conversation. You put so much content out there. Most people are going to know exactly who you are. You've been on the show a couple years ago. I'm looking forward to catching up with you today, see what you're up to, and just really having a conversation that benefits everybody. Thank you for being here today, David.
Hey, it's great to be here, Ron. Thanks for inviting me.
For the few people, if you're hiding under a rock and they don't know you, could you give everybody a kind of a brief background to kind of who you are and how you ended up in this space?
Yeah, sure. So lifelong entrepreneur, always been interested in business, always had, those childhood businesses and got a couple of careers in sales under my belt through my 20s after finishing up a business school. Eventually led to the world of business brokerage. So I owned a business broker office for 3.5 years, sold a bunch of businesses for other people. But as you well might imagine, business brokers are paid on contingency when a business is sold. And so there was a crazy roller coaster cash flow in that business, and I left it at the end of 2011 and started a career as a banker. And while I was working as a banker, people kept calling me because they were given my name to ask for help on working on buy-sell transaction deals. And eventually, when the bank reorganized, I saw an opportunity to kind of help people with buying and selling small businesses with a very different kind of business model. So ever since 2015, I've been working with people as a consultant and helping them to analyze deals if they're a buyer, helping people prepare to sell their business if they're a seller. And it's all driven by a YouTube channel that I run where I talk about buying, selling, financing small and medium-sized businesses. And I've written a bunch of books. In fact, I've got a new book coming out this fall that I'm just putting the finishing touches on now. And part of what is in the book is going to be something we're talking about today, I think.
Is it I think you probably got more than a dozen. You're pushing the dozen mark, aren't you? You've got quite a few books out.
Well, some of them on Amazon are called special report instead of being
Okay.
called a book,
Right.
but I think this one will be number 8.
Okay.
So the first one came out in 2014 and it's really about the first one is called Invest Local, and it's about making loans and doing leases for small businesses. And what was interesting about that is about a third of the feedback that I get about that book is actually from business owners who bought it because they wanted to better understand how to raise capital from private investors. And so that's, and then I wrote a book about franchises, a book about how to sell your own business. I wrote a book, the cover up there behind me on the screen, 21 stupid things people do when trying to buy a business. That's one sells copies every week still. And it's several years old. And so just trying to get information out there. At one time, the world of how to buy a business was a very secretive one where not many people knew how to do deals and people kind of fumbled around and tried to figure it out. Today, there's all kinds of information out there, and I'm just trying to contribute and help people learn. Of course, the ultimate goal through putting out all the content is to demonstrate my understanding and knowledge so that people want to hire my firm to do these consulting engagements. That's the ultimate goal for me, of course.
People ask me all the time, it's like, hey, should I get a buy side or a sell side broker? And I usually like, no. Find a buy side or sell side advisor. There's a huge difference. And I have to explain to most people think they're going to sell their business in a week, right? Or a month or 2 months. And I was like, no, if you do it right, this is probably a multi-year engagement and you're going to want somebody to groom you to get it the most out of it. If you're not in a hurry, if you don't have a catastrophic reason why you got to sell, there's some things you're going to have to do to groom that business to get it ready. And you're not looking for necessarily a broker A broker to me is somebody that you've already got all that work done. You've either done it yourself or figured out somebody, and they're helping you market and sell. And most of them have some issues, right? It's just a
Well, yeah, I mean, because people will sometimes mislabel me as a broker, right?
right,
And I'll correct them and I'll say, a business broker is someone who has an agency capacity. So a broker represents someone to someone else.
mhm,
And so if you're going to sell a business and you hire a broker, that broker is going to promote and advertise, market the business. They're going to talk to prospective buyers who respond to ads. They're going to talk to those people about the business. They're going to try to solicit an offer from those people to try to make the deal happen. And they act as a go-between. And then to your point, there are qualified brokers, and then there are people who don't quite know what they're doing. And so I have never told anyone to get a buy side broker. And here's why, because it just becomes a game of broken telephone.
mm,
Because now you're trying to say something to your broker who then relays that information to another broker who then relays it to the other party. And you've got this chain that is imperfect in communication. And I've just seen too many deals stumble and fall apart because too many people were trying to intermediate. A real qualified broker actually tries to create a relationship between the buyer and seller because you need to have trust between those two parties in order for any kind of deal to come together. And you cannot have trust for someone that you've never spoken to or never met. And so, like, I can tell right away when someone says to me, "Oh, the broker won't let me meet the seller." I'm like, "Okay, well, then the broker's actually an issue here.
mhm.
And you're going to have to come up with a plan for how you're going to manage this relationship with this broker." And a lot of the times in that particular kind of case, it's someone from the real estate world who's trying to get into business sales and they don't understand the difference between the two.
Rapport is everything in this. I tell brokers all the time, look, like, well, just give me. They say, give me the questions. I'll get them answered for you. I was like, no, you don't understand. How somebody answers the question, the fact that I asked them the question, their responses, their micro expressions, all that comes into play when I say it on Zoom and I see them when we're talking, and it helps me build the next question. How comfortable they are answering it. All those things influence my next question. So I don't want to hand you a question and have you get it answered, and it just doesn't work that way. I can't build a rapport that way, and it's critical for a buyer and seller to build that rapport, to be that safe pair of hands, and there's no way to do it with that intermediary. Even with one person, that broken telephone, well, anytime you say something to somebody and they say it to somebody else, but you have their interpretation of it in place, right? They're like, "Well, what I think you meant was," like, "No, that's not what I said." "Why? I thought you meant
Mm.
this." Like, "No, that's not what I said." So, I get that. I like that you do the advisory side. I think that's where I tell people all the time, if you need help, find, whether it's buy side or sell side, find somebody who who will coach you, teach you, and be by your side, not in your place. You want somebody to be what I call a buy side or sell side advisor. There's all kinds of names people call themselves, consultants and everything like that. And there's great ones out there. Point people to your content all the time. Like, start here.
Thank you.
Yeah. Do what he says, come back in 6 months when you got half this stuff done, and I might be interested in buying it. I do point them to my own content too, like, say, here's 3 episodes of mine. Here's a channel, man. You just watch this channel. He'll walk you through what you need. I tell him if you work with him, he'll probably groom you to have something that I might wanna buy. I tell sellers that on a regular basis. So, thank you for what you put out there,
Sorry.
and it works. So, let's talk about, like, kinda your hot point right now, and we talked about a little bit before the show. There's all these things talking about zero down, low down deals, and it causes an issue. It causes what we both refer to as, like, over leveraged businesses. So, where do you see
So,
that being a problem, and what can we do to avoid it?
I think the first thing is I think we should take a big step back
Mhm.
and ask ourselves what kind of level of leverage is normal in business. And in order to answer the question, we actually have to look at a true free market where businesses are doing their thing without any kind of intervention from government. Okay. And so, really, if you're going to look at the United States, the big intervention from government in the small business space is the SBA. And so, if we look at large companies and you look at all the big stock market companies are divided up into different kind of sectors or groups. And if you exclude the financials, so take the banks out of it, for your industrial companies, your transportation companies, your communication companies, all these other companies, what you will find is that their balance sheets are typically between 50 and 60% debt, and the balance is equity. Okay. And so why is that? Well, it's because when these companies go to borrow money, because they're borrowing this, what the market believes is a reasonable amount of debt, they're able to get great interest rates. So if one of those companies decided, hey, we're going to leverage up our balance sheet to 90%, what's going to end up happening is increasingly as the later lenders come and keep lending the money at the end of the line, that leads you up to that 90%, the cost of that debt is going to get higher and higher and higher. So think about a mid-market deal and you're borrowing against the assets or collateral in the business and you get a bank loan at 10% interest. And then you say, we need more debt. So then you bring in some kind of mezzanine finance, right? And it's going to be maybe 18 or 19%. And that's exactly what I'm talking about. The more you leverage up a business, the more expensive it gets. Now, in the world of small business, if you go and get an SBA loan, it doesn't matter if you borrow 50% of your acquisition cost or 90% of the acquisition cost, the interest rate's the same. That's not natural.
Right.
That's a de facto subsidy from the government to the world of small business, because in a natural market, lenders wouldn't lend that amount. And so you're talking about putting yourself into what would be considered a very risky kind of position anywhere else. And why would lenders in those big public companies consider a 90% leveraged company to be risky? Well, because they would realize just how much of the cash flow of the company was being earmarked for debt service. And they would realize that, hey, if there's any kind of hiccup in what's happening in this business, there's a real risk that the company isn't going to be able to make their payment. And that's why the interest rate would be so much higher in a highly leveraged situation naturally without the government intervention. So here we are in 2024, and people have been going out and doing acquisitions with 80, 90% financing for years and years on these floating rate debts. And now all of a sudden, interest rates shot up and pretty much doubled over the course of the last couple of years. And there's a lot of people out there who bought businesses with these really high loans, and now their payments, in some cases, maybe have doubled because they need to cover the interest and they need to make some kind of payment towards principal. So all of a sudden, what maybe looked like a really great, solid cash flowing opportunity when they made the deal is now sort of a desperate between a rock and a hard place kind of situation. And a lot of the times when people get into this, they look at the cash flow of the business through this frame of vernacular that we use in the world of small business. So they look at the seller's discretionary income or earnings, or they look at EBITDA, for example. And those levels of cash flow specifically exclude depreciation and amortization. They exclude interest, they exclude taxes, and and in the case of seller's discretionary earnings, it doesn't include the owner's time, right? The owner has to work full time to earn that money. So people will say, well, the SDE is 400 grand and my debt service, is going to be 250. Look, I still have 150 of money for myself. But once they take home a salary, cover CapEx, so they replace machinery and equipment, which is what depreciation represents, pay taxes, et cetera, like there's no money left. Like I listen to podcasts all the time where people are talking about their deals where they had $1 million EBITDA acquisition that they bought for 3 times EBITDA. And they say how hard it is for them to take out like $150,000 salary. And that's exactly what I'm talking about, because they're so levered that most of that cash flow is going out to debt service. And then if there's any kind of growth they have to finance through acquiring new equipment or anything like that, it just eats up all the cash flow. So when you find yourself in a position like that, then the worry is what happens if we have some kind of bump in the cash flow? And in the world of small business, you can easily have a 10 or 15% decline in revenue in a year. Like if you look historically at the earnings of any business, it'll bump up and down with these different oscillations over the course of time. And we've been running, if you extract the weirdness of COVID, we've been running now for 10 years without a recession. And I know a lot of people say we're in one now. And so this is the time when businesses are going to have these downturns. And so the whole being over leveraged is really scary for people that have already done deals. And for people that are out there looking for a deal, be aware of what you're getting yourself into. If you intend to leverage yourself up to this degree, like I know why people are always talking about zero down and low down deals. It's because they're trying to make this whole scenario attractive to people that don't have any money. They're trying to say you can do it too, even if you're broke. And I'm pretty loud in saying that buying a business is not something you do out of an act of desperation. It's not a solution to your financial problems. It's a leveling up move. Like when you can't go any further in your job and you know you've got more to offer the world and you've got a solid base and your household finances are in good order and you run your household profitably. Do you know what they call profit in your household?
Income, right?
Saving. Because
Yeah.
if you run your household and your expenses are less than your income, you end up with savings, right? And so if you can run your household in such a way that you can accumulate money, you're demonstrating that you're a prudent custodian of that money. And this is why personal credit scores and down payments are so important in the world of business banking, because when a business banker looks at a deal and they see a buyer who is prudent financially, can accumulate some degree of money to put into the deal, then they have confidence that that person is going to be a better manager and steward of the business. When someone's doing, all these crazy acrobatic to try and bandage and duct tape together a deal with none of their own money, it doesn't inspire a lot of confidence. And it also leads to what I call the day two problem, which we've been getting at here over the past 10 minutes. Is I've seen a lot of people over the course of my career try and pull all these stunts to figure out how they're going to buy a business with no money. And then they pull off the deal and they feel very proud of themselves because they got this business now and they didn't put any money into it. But now they have to run the business. And now they've got this Frankenstein monster of debt. Because as you know, Ron, for someone who's going to pull off a deal like that, what it usually means is a bunch of different debt tools, right? And sometimes you don't have access to the best ones if you're going to do this. You don't have access to the bank financing because you don't have the down payment. So you've got leases and merchant cash advances and credit card advances and loans from your cousin and all this kind of thing. And a lot of it is not amortized over a very long period of time. And so you've taken that leverage monster and you've made it even worse because now your obligations are really tight and usually very expensive. It's not a good place to be.
One of the fallacies that I see and that scares me is a lot of these guys goes, "Yeah, I'm leveraged through the teeth to get this deal done, but I'm gonna double this business in the first 12 months." And that just rattles my cage so much. You're buying a business from somebody who's ran it. It's second generation. It's been in their family for 45 years. And day one, you think you're going to do a better job than two generations of people who have been doing this their entire life. That's some ego you got there, buddy. And I
Yep.
look when I'm looking at deals, it's like I want big profit margins. There's a lot of industries I don't touch because I look for things that have huge profit margins because I know I gotta have some learning curve there. I've gotta when you buy a business, I always say this on the show over and over again. When you build something, it's yours to figure out and figure out if you can make it work. When you buy it, it's yours to screw up. Right? And I gotta have some room to make some mistakes right there because I know I'm not gonna be as good as the last guy for a little while, right? The operator I bring in that was a general manager, he'd been there for 15 years. He's still not the owner. There's just knowledge that that owner has done and can see come he can sense and see things coming down the pike because he's done it 6 times in 3 generations, whether it's a 10-year cycle or whatever, the economy, he sees this stuff coming that you'll never see. And to say, "Well, I'm cool with it being this leverage because 'cause I'm gonna do X, Y, and Z to it." They're still on fax machines, don't have a website. I'm gonna grow it by 75% in the next year, and that'll cover all my debt. It can happen, but it doesn't always happen, and it's a bad thing to have a position where it has to happen.
You know, I've had many conversations with people who have bought businesses, and the assumption has been that the tech stack of the business is inadequate. So here's a home service business, for example, and we're going to put Service Titan in or one of these other systems, right? And those systems are fantastic. But the mistake that a lot of these entrepreneurs make is they assume that applying the tool is going to make them so much more efficient or profitable than the previous system that was there before, which may have been a paper-based system. Again, to your point, someone who's been running a business for several decades, they may have a paper-based system, but that system has been refined over the course of time and the owner knows what's going on. Like, sure, they don't have GPS tracking on the technician, but when they see at the end of the day that the person went to 4 different locations, did these 4 different jobs, I mean, the owner knows this person was busy all day. They obviously got this work done, right? And so just assuming that the tool is going to give you these huge advantages isn't necessarily correct. Now, is that paper-based system adequate to grow the size of the workforce? You may run into growing pain. And so, yeah, you're going to need some of these technology things, but it's not the tech that's going to cause the growth. The growth has to come through actually finding more customers. And I've just seen so many people think that the tools are the solution to the growth, and it's not.
Yeah, I had somebody like, "Yeah, we're gonna double the sales in the next 6 months." My first question was like, "Well, how many sales are they turning away because they're at capacity now?" Like,
Yeah.
how much business are they turning away because they're at capacity? Well, I don't think they are. Then you're not gonna grow it. Unless they're already turning business away because they're at capacity, and you have an idea to increase capacity, maybe buying a second one that's way under capacity that just started out or something, and you've got a solution to that. They're turning business is coming in faster than they can handle. You're not it takes something to growing this. I mean, hell, I've got a marketing MBA, and I've been trained by some of the best marketing people in the world, and I won't tell anybody I can come in and double your business in the first 6 months. It'd be a lie, right? It's gonna take me 6 months to learn your business thoroughly enough to know exactly who your customers. I can figure it out in 2 days, kinda who they are. But to know really who they are and really what they need and to see that, that takes some time. There's some cool tools coming out, and it's actually helping with that. The AI, and there's some other stuff that can really crawl through data faster than a human being can. I see that increasing in or decreasing the amount of time it takes to really build those deep personas and really know customer bases, but I think that's one of the biggest problems people have. They're comfortable taking on or they think they're comfortable taking on this leverage because they think they can outgrow it, right? They think they can outrun the horse in the horse race.
Well, and the other thing too, and I don't mean to disparage the younger generation. I'm going to be 49 this year. And so I remember what business was like before the internet
Mm,
because I was basically just getting into university when we first got the World Wide Web. I remember when Yahoo was a list of websites. But there was a guy on Twitter the other day or X,
mhm.
and he was saying like we're targeting homeowners with this kind of home and we're trying to figure out our Facebook ads to get these people. And my response to the tweet was, why don't you just go to those houses and leave something on the doorknob? Like, why are you trying to do everything from your desk behind a screen when you could literally get a print shop to make you some kind of door hanger ad piece for cents a piece and get out there and just drive around looking for the neighborhoods that have these homes and just like hang something on the doorknob. And one of my first businesses after university was a junk removal business.
Mhm.
And so when we would visit someone's home and we would take, load up the truck with all the stuff they wanted to get rid of, one of the things that the guys would do before they left the neighborhood is they would just take 10 minutes and they would visit the 8 or 9 houses around that person and just leave these door knockers. And
Yep.
usually within 2 weeks, we get a call from one of those people. Like, it worked so well, and it cost the time of wages for 10 minutes, right, is all it cost, really. And I see so much opportunity in some of those old school guerrilla marketing tactics in everyday business that people are just ignoring because they want it to all be automatic.
I wanna step back and talk about your just the creative guerrilla marketing, door knocking and stuff. Even the big guys still do it. So when I was in the real estate space, we had one property that was just really awkward. It was way bigger than anything in the neighborhood. It's 7 bedrooms, had 2 different living rooms, had a swimming pool in the backyard, like 3,700 square feet, 2-story. So it was hard to rent out in an area because it was 3, 4 times the size of everything else. One of the things we found, though, is we found that we were renting it out to sales teams that do canvassing. And the big dogs, I'm talking about billion-dollar corporations, DirecTV, Comcast, they still have canvassing crews that'll go out there, and we kinda got a reputation for being willing to let the sales guys kinda They're a little rowdy. They party a little bit in the place. There's a swimming pool in the backyard. We have to get on them occasionally to clean up their mess. There was a empty lot on one side of us and a Mazzio's Pizza in front of us, which is perfect for sales guys. There's only one house close enough where people would hear them, and I just made friends with the little old lady, and I said, "Take your hearing aids out at night. These kids are gonna be loud." And she's like, "And call me if they get too out of hand, and I'll go calm them down." And she was cool with it. So we rented it out to crew after crew of these people, and these billion-dollar companies still pay people to hang out flyers, knock on doors. And I would talk
Yeah.
to these guys, and they were making good money. These are 19, 20 somethings that are go out and making a few grand a week selling DirecTV or selling Comcast internet and home services and stuff. But, let's go back to, like, I still wanna cover, like, really go into depth. How do you buy a company, and what's the proper leverage? Like, we talked about over leveraging a little bit, but what is the proper
Yeah.
ratio? What are the what there's a thing in the big guys, it's called a debt to income ratio, or there's a debt servicing ratio that they use in the banking industry. What would be proper? I mean, how do these guys know if you're a acquisition entrepreneur, how do you know you're in the safe zone?
Well, you have to look at what you know and what you can get away with if things go bad. So, I mean, some people will talk about the amount of leverage they're willing to take on based on other cash flows that they have from other businesses they own. Or people will talk about sort of a plan B idea, like what sort of assets are in this business if things didn't work out well and we had to sell things off, and they'll base their amount of leverage off that. They, there's all kinds of ways to do it, but globally, outside the US where there's no SBA, most lenders, when they look at a business deal, the minimum they typically look at is a 3-to-1 debt to equity ratio, which means about a quarter of the money is coming as a down payment from the person who's buying the business. And I'll tell you, you mentioned real estate investments. I also did some real estate investing at one time. And back in the early 2000s, I was buying multifamily homes. And it was possible at the time where I lived to get multifamily homes with 5 and 10% down. But the problem is when you buy these like 3-unit buildings with 5 or 10% down, is that if one of them goes empty, one of the units, you're out of pocket for your mortgage payment, right? So I can tell you all kinds of horror stories of people I know who bought a bunch of these things because they took their equity and tried to stretch it as far as they could, putting the minimum down payment on a bunch of different rental properties that they could get. And then one of their units would go empty, and they said, "Holy cow, if I don't find a tenant right away, I'll have to come up with some of the money for the mortgage payment, and then I don't think I can." Right? And so then what ends up happening is they end up renting to an undesirable person
Yeah.
because that person happens to appear with the money. And then all of a sudden you got other tenants calling you saying, "Hey, there's a party here at night," or "I think there's drug activity going on," or what have you. When I bought my buildings, what I did is I borrowed against the home equity I had in my house, and I put 25% down on the different properties I was buying. And it allowed me not to have to buy mortgage insurance, number one. So my balance sheet looked better because the debts weren't inflated by the amount of the mortgage insurance. But furthermore, I could have a unit go empty in a 3-unit building, and the 2 remaining units would still cover the debt service, right? And so this is what I'm talking about. It's like, what can you control and what can you afford to have go wrong? It's very rare for a 3-unit apartment building to have 2 or 3 units vacant at the same time. But if someone's going to leave, you're probably going to have an empty unit for a month, and you need the time to repaint and clean the carpets and all that other kind of stuff too. So when you look at a business, you're like, well, what could go wrong? Like, if I have a 10% drop in sales, am I still going to be able to make these debt payments? What if I have a 25% drop in sales because the economy goes down and something changes with the competitive aspects of this business? A new competitor comes in or something or other. Would I be able to lay off some employees? Are there any kinds of cuts I can make somehow to save money? And you kind of play the what if and think, if my one of the favorite questions I like to ask is, a year from now, if I have failed, what would likely have been the cause? Because it can allow you kind of think about what different hazards might creep up or might exist. And basically, Ron, the more money you can put down, the more solid this thing is. It's like ballast in a ship, right? The ballast helps to hold it more up straight and makes it a smoother ride in the rough seas. And this is why big public companies are typically only 50 or 60%. Obviously, if you have other resources outside the business, like when it comes to zero down business acquisition deals, I tell people they're real and they get done all the time, but just usually not by broke people. They're usually done by people who have a lot of wealth and resources in other forms. And so they might own a lot of property. They might have a lot of investments, stock market stuff. And so they can get the leverage because they overall have a high net worth. And if something really went wrong, they've got the resources to put into the business, either to deleverage it by paying down the debt or just to put in some money to service that debt until things turn around. Like, you just don't want to end up out of money. There's an expression I learned a long time ago. I asked someone, we were talking about a particular business that had failed. And I asked someone who knew the party. I said, so what happened there anyway? And the guy says to me, it's just a case of someone putting their last nickel into a deal. And so what that meant was the person basically took all the money they had available and put it into the acquisition and had no resources left to deal with any kind of bumps or problems further down the road. And then they had bumps and problems that they couldn't recover from.
And most people think they can, well, if it's overstaffed, if I get in a spell or get into some financial trouble, we could cut 20% of the staff and it would still be doing well. The problem is that's a lot harder than you would ever think it is. I told you I worked for Excite. What I didn't tell you is I was there when it went bankrupt. It was a big corporation at home at bottom. I didn't even know this. I was probably brought in because I had worked for another company that the SoftBank had funded and they pulled the plug on it. It was the market had dried up. We tried to sell it to Excite. And Excite said, why would we ever buy you? Because this is my introduction to one of my introductions of mergers and acquisitions. Like, why would we ever buy you? Your customers have nowhere else to go. Like, there's only 2 people, 3 people in this market that do what we do, cable internet service through cable systems. We're one of the only people they can go to, so they're gonna come to us anyway. Why would we buy you? By the way, Ron over there, when he leaves, can we have him? And they basically paid my previous company to let me leave early. They gave them a bonus and gave me a signing bonus to come run it. And then a year and a half later, they're in bankruptcy. So I'm thinking they knew that they were going to have to liquidate. I was already in the model of liquidating all the equipment, had all the auction dates set up, knew how to cancel leases, knew how to negotiate all that stuff. And I'm thinking, back of my head is somebody knew this was coming down the road, that this was a big risk. And then they brought me in because they knew I could actually help maximize the value if it did go down that path. That said, it was brutal. I mean, I had 187 employees myself, and they kept moving me around. We laid off hundreds
Wow.
of people, right? I say that I had 7 managers that worked for me, but, like, I had more than a dozen grown men in my office crying because they didn't know how they're gonna feed their family because the market wasn't good during this is 2000 when the early 2000s right after September 11th, so what is it, a year or 2 after that? So right around
Mhm.
then, there wasn't a bunch of jobs out. There were still jobs, but it was really slow. There was no more hiring bonuses. It was slow to hire. People were really worried about where they're going next. And so it's a lot harder to pull that trigger. If you think, well, if it's overstaffed, I can lay people off. More often than not, you're going to wait longer than you should have to do that. You're going to hesitate and ride the
Well,
cycle way deep into
and
trouble.
this is what people don't get, especially people that don't have operational experience that are looking at buying a business. They say, well, if sales go down, I'll just let someone go. But once you're in the operating position and you're running the business, you realize well, number one, you're always hopeful that you're going to be able to pull it around and that
Mhm.
sales will return. And you realize what kind of investment and effort it took to get that person up to speed and make them productive in the business. And so if you let them go and then 3 months later you need them again, they may not be available. And now you have to take someone who's fresh and put them through all of the training, et cetera, to get them to be productive, which could take a couple more months. And so business owners are, you said like people hang on too long into the downturn. That's why
Mm.
is they see the investment that the business has made in the human resources. Basically, like, we've helped this person grow, learn, develop. Now they're expert. They're really good at what they're doing. They're very valuable to the business. We like, it's terrible when someone quits. Here we are faced with the decision of actually pushing them out. Like,
Mm.
it's like having a great piece of equipment that's really reliable and just saying, well, let's send it for scrap. Like, it's not something you want to do as a business. You want to be building all the time. And this can, unfortunately, let people hang on too long to the costs, and it just makes things worse.
You have that emotional investment too. I mean, if you're a business under 25 to 50 employees, I've had a few, and I would go to their weddings. Like, I would get invited to
Yeah.
their weddings. I'd get invited to their children's weddings. That said, like, you become close with these people, and to cut them loose is a very emotional decision. Not like it's a very emotional weight. It's a heavy weight to actually pull the trigger. Like, hey, I know I have to do it. Yeah, they're the lowest performer, but man, my wife just went to their wife's, you call it baby shower. They have a baby on the way. How can I cut this person loose? And it's because it's a business. You have to. So I think a lot of people put a lot of weight into things they think they can do. That's a lot harder to do when it comes time to do it. I see
Yeah.
business owners all the time when we're sitting down, we're talking, we're going through, getting ready to go through due diligence. And one of the things is like, who are your top performers and who do you keep it around because they're just, you're loyal to their dad because he used to work there and stuff. There's always somebody. And I don't say it just that way, but there's a way to ask the question. And like, who are your top performers and who should or shouldn't be still doing what they're doing? You'll always find that business owners know that they have people what I call the wrong butts in the wrong seats, right? They know Joe's not the best at doing what he's doing, but his dad worked there and he told his dad he'd take care of him when he was there. And he's not that great at his job, but he just don't know what else he can make the kid do. That happens constantly. So here I am looking at these businesses and I'm thinking, how do I think I'm gonna be any different than this owner who's built loyalty and built connection with these people after I get to know them, right? I'm human. So, I think a lot of these acquisition entrepreneurs think they're more robotic than they truly are. They're gonna get in, they're gonna make relationships, and a lot of decisions they think they can pull off, if they're over leveraged and they can correct, are gonna be a lot tougher than they think initially on that closing document, when they sign that closing.
All business is done with the help of people.
Mhm.
It's all interhuman relationships. I had to when I got out of business brokerage, I closed my business brokerage office. I had to let go my receptionist at the time, who I really considered to be a friend when I was really worried that she would be upset with me. But I explained what was going on and offered her severance and did all those things. And I felt amazing when the following year she asked me if I would be the MC at her wedding.
Mhm.
And it was great, and she's still my friend today, and she actually spent some time working with me here just a couple of years ago post-COVID because she was at a place where she lost her position because of all the shutdowns and everything. And so, yeah, you become friends with these people.
Yep.
And there's also life beyond business. Like, sometimes you're gonna do business with people, you're gonna develop friendships, things could go well or things could go poorly, and 10 years later, you're gonna end up crossing paths with some of these same people. And so it's really important how you treat people and the way you conduct yourself and the reputation that you earn for yourself and how you do things.
Going back to, you know, in the business realm, what's the alternative, right? Other if you don't have a $200,000 laying around in your SBA loans and aren't gonna work for you, and you really wanna try this out, are there financing mechanisms? Other than I guess seller finance is probably the only thing where you work out something with the seller and you build a deep rapport and they trust you, but other than that, or they just need to
Oh,
stay out of the
what
game
do
or
you
is there a way
mean
to get into it?
as far as buying a business when you don't have money to make a bigger down payment?
Yeah, when you don't have for any reason, whether through bad financial management or just a down cycle in your life, you don't have the down payment, but you wanna try this. Are there methods that you would like, "Hey, if you're gonna do this anyway and I can't talk you out of it, go this path?"
Well, equity comes from your own pocket or it comes from other owners.
Mhm,
So it's you and a group of others or investors is what most people would say, right?
mhm.
People that are going to be owners with you in some capacity. And so it's not just money that other owners, investors can potentially deliver to you. It's a lot of other things too, experience, etc. And so if you don't have the funds and you want to buy a business, then you're going to have to invest in relationships with people who are going to see your potential and believe in you and feel that you are going to be a safe bet for their money because you're going to need them to put up the money so you can execute and buy the business and operate it. And so sometimes I'll run into people who, are in that position. They don't have any money and they want to do a deal. And then I'll start to ask them about how they spend their time and who they spend their time with, right? Are you consciously making an effort to spend time with the right kinds of people? Are you hanging out, having beers with your high school buddies on the weekend? Or are you involving yourself with like the Rotary Club or the Kiwanis Club or the business fellowship at your church or something? Like, are you spending your time around people who are knowledgeable about business and maybe have some money to invest? Are you investing in those relationships? There's a tab on my website called Buy Business with No Money, where I put all the different videos I've done on this topic over the course of time. And a lot of them are meant to show just how difficult this is to pull off. But on that tab, it's davidcbarnett.com is the blog site. On that tab, there is one video, and it's an example of a trucking company in Alberta, Canada. And the owner hired a guy to work for him. And after a few years, that guy became the manager and he managed it for a few years. And then the owner decided he wanted this guy to be the buyer. And the guy didn't have any money. And it's actually a case study from a bank website because
Hmm.
the bank uses this as a marketing piece. And so what the two of them did is the two of them went to the bank together and the bank said, here's what we'll do. We'll look at all of the assets in the business and we'll make you as big a loan as we can. And we'll leverage up the business. And then the business receives the loan proceeds. And then the business issued a big dividend to the owner at the time, the older person.
Hmm.
Doing so, now the equity of the business is worth a lower amount because now the business has this big debt and the cash has been taken out. So the seller then sells the shares of the trucking company to the manager and he seller financed the deal. So that's an exact example of a guy who managed to buy a business with no money, with a bank's help. And the seller maybe even has guaranteed that bank loan personally,
Hmm.
but he still entrusted the shares of the company to the guy who he knew for years and who was the manager. So what did that buyer do? That buyer demonstrated competency, demonstrated a willingness to work, demonstrated honesty and a bunch of other great virtues, and invested his time in building a relationship with that business owner and developed a trust was developed between the two people. And that is what it took to pull off that no money deal. And it's not the kind of thing you're going to pull off by cold calling strangers and suggesting that you have some kind of advanced creative financing technique. These relationships are built over time. And so either you have to develop the relationship with someone who has a business to be able to execute the kind of deal that was described in the video, or you have to develop the relationship with other people who can deliver cash to help you execute an acquisition wherever you happen to find it. And again, you're not going to find strangers who want to put up money 5 days after they met you, right?
Right.
People who raise $100 million in a Series C financing, blah 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 stuff. That's Silicon Valley stuff. That's headline stuff. That's bigger mid market stuff. That's not the world of small business. In the world of small business, the number one factor people take into account when they make an investment is who is the entrepreneur. Do I know this person? Do I trust this person? Do I think this person has a realistic plan? And do I think they can execute it? They invest in the entrepreneur as much as they invest in the business deal.
Absolutely. I've interviewed a few people that have raised $100+ million, and the unique thing amongst them is they all had track records. They all had of success. They all
Mhm.
had business partners people knew and wanted to be business partners with, so their team was good. And they had a hell of a story to tell. They're doing something unique in the space that people wanted to be part of. One of them was building a hundreds of millions, potentially $1 billion business that was gonna be women-centric. They've committed to all their investors at $10 million in EBITDA, that when they get to the point where they're hiring a C-suite to run the roll-up or the, holding co, whatever you wanna call it, that it would all be female, basically, and there's a movement enough that people wanted to get involved with that. They have the the mayor of Miami's wife's involved, and all these different people are involved, and they raised over 100, I think right now they're at almost $250 million of raised capital, but they had a heck of a story to tell. Another gentleman raised nearly $100 million, he's housing elderly, homeless veterans, and taking homeless veterans, drug and alcohol homes and stuff like that. He has the real estate to leverage because it's assisted living facilities he's building and buying, and he's got a hell of a story to tell. I'm taking care of the elderly. I'm taking care of people with mental and memory issues. I'm taking care of people want to get involved with those type of projects, and they'll invest with them because there's some social capital to say they're invested in that. So
Well, and I mean, I don't know anything about those projects, but I would imagine the types of people that are investing in $100 million fundraisers are very different kinds of investors than the ones who might kick in 15 or $25,000 towards your $100,000 equity raise to buy like an ice cream shop,
these are
right?
family offices and institutional
Yeah,
guys. Yeah.
it's a whole different kind of thing because those family offices and institutional people are never going to look at your ice cream shop deal. The people who are going to look at the ice cream shop deal are going to be people that probably know you or know someone who knows you. You're going to have to work your personal network. And this gets back to my comment earlier about where do you spend your time? Because if you're spending your time in and amongst the people who know business and have done well at business and have money, that's where you're going to cut your teeth and actually meet people who are going to be the ones potentially to want to support an investor in that kind of small business deal versus your high school buddies who are probably sit around complaining that they're broke, right? It's you got to think about where you're headed and you got to think about what kind of relationships are going to help you get to where you want to be and think about what the kind of person does, what their behaviors are, what their pastimes are, etc., who are going to be able to make a case to those investors potentially and actually bring something together. And so it's got to make sense and you got to demonstrate your capacity. And if you could imagine, for example, that people are going to question your skills and people are going to question your background, people are going to question your history, then you may be looking at a longer path. So, for example, maybe you should be trying to get yourself into a management role at your job. Maybe you should try to get yourself a new job where you oversee other people, etc., so that you are in a better position to demonstrate the skills that are going to be required when you become an operator of a small business.
There's one avenue that we haven't talked about that I see people that are being very successful in getting multiple deals done, and it's zero down, but it's not acquiring the entire company. They've nicknamed it YBO or whatever, but what it is they're working. They have a unique skill set. They're bringing something to the table. It might be marketing, it might be sales, or doing something. They reach out to the business owners who are thinking about selling or maybe preparing to exit. They say, "Let me work with you for X number of months, years, or whatever. I want a piece of equity and a paycheck. I'll do X, grow your business by Y. And if I achieve that, we hit the goal. I'd like to have a discussion with you about being a potential buyer of your company at the other end." And it's you work your way in and you buy out the company at the other end of your executed thing. If you've got a hell of a skill set, I see people doing it, getting it done. And I see people with weak skill sets trying to do it. But the guys that are getting those deals done, they've got something to bring to the table. They have something to offer that entrepreneur, the business owner. And it's like, hang in there with me for another, year or two. Let's do X, Y, and Z to it. And if I achieve that, then we'll talk about buying the rest of it. I see them getting done.
Well, I've seen a lot of people talk about it, and I have not seen a lot of those deals done. And the danger in becoming a minority equity holder in a small business is that the majority business owner is going to run the business the way they see fit. And a lot of the times in the world of small business, people will do things to become quote unquote tax efficient. So they'll put their teenage children's cell phone bills into the company plan. They'll run personal gas expenses through the business, all those kinds of things that
Hmm.
you normally see appear as an add back when a business is being put up for sale. And so if you own 10% of a small business and somebody's doing all that kind of stuff, what's happening is that the net income is being reduced, which then reduces, of course, any amount available for distribution. And so uh, I've seen people want to get involved to this degree with small business and become these minority shareholders. And what typically happens is a lot of time is spent trying to figure out these deals.
Hmm.
And then when the paperwork comes around, people will work on the paperwork And then people will get advice from attorneys. And I mean, an attorney might point out a dozen different potential issues that could come up. Or if they talk to anyone, like if they were to talk to me about it, I'll point out a dozen issues that might come up. And then people realize that what it comes down to is they're going to be doing some work for less than a market rate of pay in exchange for shares, which may or may not have any value, in order to execute a deal with a seller who may or may not deliver on what they say they're going to do. And even if there's a contract in place, if the seller doesn't want to fulfill their end of the bargain, any kind of litigation or legal or recourse is usually just totally unaffordable and doesn't make sense for the size of the investment that's been made. Like it's just so many complicated moving parts that it could only really ever work again if the relationship and the trust is there.
Yeah. I was gonna say the people I know getting them done are experts at creating rapport, and they're like me. They have other significant investments. They have other, like, they don't need this to survive. They're doing it because they want to stay in the game. So if one or two of them don't succeed, they cut their ties and move on to one, focus on the ones that do. So I don't think it's a play. Now that you said that, I want to clear up. It's not a play if you're broke. It's a play if you've got time and expertise in to bring to the deal, and maybe the company's not ready for a full acquisition, or maybe you just bring something to the table and you want to see them correct and do a turn and do some stuff, do some things. I know guys that are doing, got 15 or 20 of these going at any given time. I've interviewed them and talked to them, but like I said, they've exited before. They have full-blown companies that pay their bills that they own 100% of. And this is kind of an advisory thing. They're advising for equity with the intention at some point they'll probably buy the entire thing out. But, you know, it's not a play if you've never been a manager, you've never run a company, you just got some skills and you think you're going to go, and you took a class online about doing paid ads and you're going to grow somebody through pay per click and get some equity. Chances are you're going to be like you said, underpaid and underserved in that contract. So I agree on that. Yeah. But I see people getting what they call zero down deals done. And the way they're doing it is they're negotiating equity for expertise and with the long term, building that long term rapport. Like you said, the guy that bought the trucking company, he worked there for a couple of years. That's what these guys are doing. They're
Yeah.
going to go spend 18 months becoming a trusted resource for that individual. And then they're going to negotiate a larger, what they call annuity deals, which is nothing more than seller financing. But you can't get that on day one because the guy doesn't know you from Adam. You have to get in and perform and produce and give results and show people that you can do what you say you're going to do. So there's none of this is going to be easy, right? Anybody that tells you you're going to blink an eye and own a multi-million-dollar company for zero down is marketing to you and selling you a package they probably can't deliver on.
Well, I've spoken to a lot of people over the course of time who bought into that fantasy, and a lot of them are very disappointed.
I've paid for some of the courses that some of the guys, that's what they market, but I knew going into it that there's work to do. So I'm in there to meet the other people in the network. I'm in there to learn the skills that they have of leads, sourcing leads and all the other stuff they have. So I wasn't disillusioned from start. I kind of just I'm a marketing guy by trade. My MBA is in marketing. I was like, yeah, that's a lot of marketing hype. You probably shouldn't be doing that, but I'm still gonna. You've got 3,000 people in your network, and I'd love to meet them. So you want to charge $6,000 for your course? Fine, I'll cut you a check. I just want to meet you 6,000 people that are out there trying to do this and partner with and JV with some of the ones that have real skills, right? Maybe invest in a few that have real skills. So tell us about
Yeah,
how to reach you and what you got coming out.
sure. So my blog site is davidcbarnett.com, and I've got a new book coming out this fall. It's called Buying versus Starting a Small Business. And it's
Mhm.
for people who are interested in getting into business and they're not sure if they want to buy or they want to start. And it's basically a pro-con book, and there's a section in it for people that want to get into business who don't have any money. And so I talk about all kinds of different strategies and plans for people in that scenario. And I talk about the pros and cons of both buying versus selling. And there's dangers in buying a business and there's dangers in starting one. But that's coming out this fall. And if someone goes over to davidcbarnett.com, they can sign up for my email list, and
Mhm.
you'll be informed. There's going to be some pre-release specials that people will be able to sign up for, but it's going to be good. It's got lots of great reviews and feedback from people already.
And you wanna be on that mailing list anyway. You put out great content pretty much weekly. I've got always got new stuff from you. Everybody out there knows I have newsletters and stuff. We feature your content on a regular basis. You're constantly one of the top I would consider you one of the top content creators in this space. So, thank you again
Thanks,
for
man.
everything you put out, and, we'll call that a show. Hang out for just a few seconds. I want to announce our new channel partners, the ITX Marketplace. Since 1998, ITX has created $5 billion in value by selling more than 225 IT businesses in 20 countries. ITX works exclusively with IT-enabled businesses generating between 5 million and 30 million who are ready to be sold, and M&A decision makers who are ready to buy. For over 25 years, ITX has developed industry knowledge that helps determine whether a seller is a good fit for their buyers before making the match. ITX Mergers and Acquisition Marketplace we have partnered with has a proprietary database of 50,000 plus global buyers seeking IT service firms, managed service providers, Microsoft service providers, software as a service platforms, and channel partners with Microsoft, Oracle, ServiceNow, and the Salesforce space. If you have an IT enabled business you're ready to sell, I want you to visit the itexchangenet.com/marketplace. How to exit. That link will be in the show notes. Visit them now.